Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we tear into complex sources and emerge with the key insights, all killer, no filler.
Today, we're not just reading history. We're witnessing a raw, incredibly dramatic moment in the 13th century.
Yeah.
It's a time just defined by the collapse of an empire and, the desperate measures of a tyrannical king.
That's it. We've been handed this stack of sources that detail a core narrative around the, let's be honest, notoriously unstable King John Lackland.
And the legendary William the Marshal.
Right. And a set of audacious, deeply loyal, and maybe slightly reckless conspirators.
I think slightly reckless is putting it mildly.
Yeah, probably. So our mission overview today is to unpack the chain of events that links a captive prince, a blind princess, and a really high-stakes forced marriage plot.
And we're looking at how that large-scale political instability, the whole collapse of the Angevin Empire, translates directly into this profound, very personal kind of tyranny.
It's high drama. And it's set against this incredibly dangerous political climate in England and Normandy, specifically in the aftermath of his disastrous campaigns on the continent.
The sources just plunge you right into that chaos.
Yeah.
King John's grip on power was tenuous at best. He was struggling desperately to hold on to the remnants of his Norman domains against King Philip II of France, who was just aggressively expansionist.
And losing Normandy wasn't just, a geographical setback.
Yeah, not at all.
It was a profound crisis of legitimacy. It's what drove John's paranoia, his need to enforce discipline through just raw fear.
Absolutely. Because losing those continental lands meant losing vast revenues, strategic garrisons, and maybe most importantly, the respect of the English barons.
Yeah, the ones who still held lands on both sides of the channel.
Exactly. So John had to compensate for this external weakness by becoming ruthlessly efficient, or maybe more accurately, ruthlessly cruel with his subjects at home.
Which is where the hostages come in. This desperate need for internal control led to his extreme reliance on high-value hostages.
And that paranoia, it just sets the stage perfectly for our key players. We have three figures who really represent the escalating stakes.
Okay, so first up,
Prince Arthur of Brittany, the royal captive. His claim to the throne was the root of John's deepest insecurity.
Then you've got Lady Ariel de Clare,
the fiercely independent niece of William the Marshal, an unwilling political pawn if there ever was one.
And finally, the starred Norman knight, Eduard FitzRandwulf, son of the powerful wolf, and he's driven by this deep moral loyalty.
And the whole narrative we're dissecting today, it really hinges on betrayal and survival. John is the center of this web, trying to secure his position through these hostages.
And the actions of these three characters, their defiance, their dedication, they ultimately challenge the king's entire authority.
It's an amazing story.
So let's jump straight into the darkest corner of John's reign. The fate of his nephew, Arthur of Brittany.
And we need to be clear here, Arthur wasn't some distant cousin.
No.
He was the son of John's older brother, Geoffrey, which by many customs made him the rightful heir over John, who was the youngest surviving brother of Richard the Lionheart.
So Arthur's claim was basically a ticking time bomb.
A huge one. The sources paint Arthur as this handsome young prince, full of ambition, but just a world of trouble for John. He had immense support in those continental territories that were, already slipping away.
And John had already stripped him of his rights as Duke of Brittany a couple of years prior, but the prince just refused to back down.
No, he didn't. And the conflict escalated when Arthur moved from, political maneuvering to direct military confrontation. The sources really emphasize his recklessness. I mean, he was only 16.
He acted as a rebellious vassal, and it all came to a head with that dramatic attack on John's own mother, the formidable Eleanor of Aquitaine, at the castle of Mirabeau.
Mirabeau is such a pivotal moment because it provided John with the legal pretext he absolutely needed.
Attacking the Dowager Queen.
Even if she was elderly at the time, it was an unforgivable political blunder by Arthur. John's forces arrived swiftly, they relieved the siege, and they captured the young prince.
So John could then stand before the assembled nobles and say, look, Arthur isn't just a captive prince, he's an active inciter of civil war.
A treasonous rebel who attacked the revered mother of the king.
So John essentially wanted to execute him as a traitor, which I guess feudal law would technically allow.
It would, but the decision was complicated by the political optics. Killing his own nephew, especially one so young, would just solidify all the claims that John was a ruthless usurper.
Which leads to these horrifying calculations that are detailed in the sources. John is literally debating the best way to permanently neutralize Arthur without causing a full-blown baronial revolt.
A revolt he absolutely couldn't handle while also facing Philip II of France. He recognized that simply killing Arthur would remove an enemy, sure, but it would also confirm to the world that he was afraid of a 16-year-old stripling.
Right. It could turn Arthur into a martyr.
And the documents show he seriously considered blinding Arthur.
Now,
The thinking was just brutally strategic. A blind king, no matter how legitimate his lineage, would never command the loyalty or respect of the nobles. Maiming him eliminates his political viability while, technically keeping him alive.
but that idea was rejected almost immediately.
Yeah. Maiming the young prince would still earn the disgust and contempt of the nobles. They valued clear, legitimate succession. It would look like pettiness, not strength. John needed a definitive solution.
But he needed Arthur to cooperate by relinquishing his claim.
And the young prince, even held in the tomb-like silence of his donjon cell in Rouen, proved remarkably defiant.
The sources say he looked his uncle straight on, declaring that neither chains nor prison towers nor the threat of the axe could make him coward enough to deny the right I hold for my father and my God.
That absolute refusal to yield his claim, which he stated right in front of his jailers, that sealed his fate.
And the sources detail the actual scene of the crime with just truly shocking brutality. It confirms that John's famed convulsive rages, these unpredictable, explosive fits of anger, were very real and very lethal.
William de Braose, the captain of the prison guard, and you should remember that name, he becomes critical later, is documented as hearing what he thought was the wail of a wounded animal coming from the cell.
And this was a hardened veteran.
Oh, yeah. Yet he hesitated to enter because he knew the specific terrifying signs of John's rages.
And that hesitation is crucial, isn't it?
It is. De Braose waited until the screams stopped, replaced only by this rhythmic, muted thudding. When he finally opened the cell door, he found John lying rigid and twitching, covered in his nephew's blood.
And the description is savage. Arthur's head was not much more than a shapeless lump of bloodied mush and shattered bone.
The murder was entirely hands-on. It suggests a complete and utter breakdown of control by the king. De Braose, even though he was hardened by years of mercenary work, was recorded as having gagged at the site.
The psychological fallout for John was immediate, but the political fallout was just catastrophic. It defined the rest of his reign.
All of Brittany, Touraine, Poitou, Normandy, they were demanding clemency, even while Arthur was alive. Now, with suspicion of murder just rampant, John lost any moral standing he might have had.
His inability to drive back Philip II was already infuriating the barons, but this murder just magnified his political weakness tenfold.
And the sources give us this fascinating detail about John's state afterwards. He was later seen wearing so many holy relics he could barely stand upright under the burden.
And that wasn't just, a personal act of penance for a tormented soul.
No, it was a desperate, visible political appeal to the deeply religious English barons. He was signaling, I am guilty, yes, but I am seeking divine forgiveness, and therefore you too must forgive me.
But by wearing his guilt so publicly, he was just confirming the extent of his crime to everyone watching.
He alienated the few powerful men still supporting him and showed a profound instability that couldn't be masked by relics or royal decrees.
So this murder, combined with his collapsing empire, made John obsessed with ensuring the loyalty of the few indispensable men he had left.
Which brings us directly to William the Marshal and the political manipulation of his family.
John's response to his rapidly eroding support was typically brutal. He weaponized the feudal system. He used hostages to enforce loyalty, exploiting his right to control the marriages of minors and female heiresses from powerful houses.
And the target of this strategy was Lady Ariel de Clare.
She was the niece of the great William the Marshal, the Earl of Pembroke, the one man John absolutely needed to keep on his side.
The Marshal had previously supported John's claim over Arthur's, but his patience was clearly wearing thin. So securing Ariel was John's way of ensuring compliance, a kind of human guarantee against the Marshal turning on him.
And the intended groom. This is the real kicker. It was Reginald de Braose,
Son of William de Braose.
the very guard who witnessed Arthur's bloody end.
Yes. The de Braose family had been generously rewarded for their silence and cooperation with newly restored estates at Radnor. This marriage was meant to instantly solidify their new position, weaving them into the high nobility through a connection to the House of Pembroke.
It was a calculated insult designed to assert John's absolute dominance.
And for Ariel, a de Clare of immense pedigree,
Yeah.
this union was just intolerable. The sources perfectly capture her fury. She calls Reginald the son of a common jailer, a man whose family was only elevated because of their proximity to regicide.
She even equates the de Braoses with inbreeding and incest, reduced to hiring themselves out like common Brabançons. We should probably clarify that term because it packs a real historical punch.
Absolutely. Brabançons were essentially these feared, brutal, mercenary soldiers from the Low Countries. Kings used them precisely because they had no local loyalties and would execute any command, no matter how cruel.
So when Ariel uses that term, she's not just being snobbish.
No, she is labeling the de Braoses not as legitimate nobles, but as lowborn, crude, disposable, hired killers who bought their status with dirty money and complicity in murder.
For a niece of William the Marshal, this forced marriage was a profound threat to her family's honor and dignity. Her defiance was immediate and politically explosive.
She flees Pembroke Castle, which is this immense, seemingly impregnable fortress. She abandons all that security and wealth, fleeing to the continent with her brother Henry.
Desperate to find William the Marshal and appeal to him to avert the marriage writ.
But her journey immediately escalates from just, flight to an act of deep political rebellion. While traveling, Ariel and Henry meet with Welsh lords Rhys and Dyfed ap Iorwerth from Gwynedd.
And this is critical. The Welsh lords were sworn, bitter enemies of the de Clares.
Meaning Ariel was willing to cross massive internal political lines to secure her freedom. It shows the depth of her desperation and her immediate grasp of political maneuvering.
So what does she do? She proposes a marriage alliance with Rhys in exchange for one critical act: waylaying the king's messenger who was carrying the official betrothal writ for Reginald.
Which is explicit treason, disrupting the king's formal communication and his legal proceedings. Her aunt, Lady Isabella, was rightfully horrified by this brazen scheme.
But Henry de Clare, Ariel's brother, he agrees. The sources note that his loyalty was neatly and completely wrapped around his sister's finger.
He's prepared to risk their family's entire estate, their lives, based on his sister's demand for personal honor.
And she was absolutely serious about the alternative marriage. She assured the cynical Lord Rhys that marrying her would grant him unprecedented access to Snowdonian Wales and potentially tap into William the Marshal's immense connections in Ireland.
She traded the political currency of her lineage for her freedom. This pact just confirms that avoiding a marriage to Reginald de Braose was worth risking absolutely everything.
So the journey to find the Marshal is now not a plea for help, but the first step in a calculated high-stakes conspiracy.
And Ariel and Henry eventually track William the Marshal to Amboise Castle in Touraine. Now, this isn't just a random stop. Amboise is the home of Randwulf de la Seine-sur-Mer, famously known as the Wolf.
Amboise becomes a kind of moral anchor then, a haven where loyal warriors can speak truthfully about the state of the kingdom.
Exactly. The castle and its residents are introduced as a moral counterpoint to John's court. You meet the Wolf, his wife Servan, and their sons, including Eduard FitzRandwulf. These are men who embody the old Norman code of loyalty and honor, not the cynical opportunism John promoted.
And Edward himself is immediately established as a figure of great prowess.
He's the Wolf's cub, a champion in the lists. He even served as the champion to Eleanor of Aquitaine herself. He'd amassed a respectable fortune on the tournament circuit. He's a man who made his name and wealth through skill and reputation, totally independent of the crown's patronage.
He's known as the Scarred One, and his reputation is complex. Ariel is decidedly not happy to see him.
No, not at all, especially after their prior contentious and weirdly intimate sparring practice in the armory.
That prior encounter really established their highly charged dynamic, didn't it?
Oh, it was a fascinating moment. She showed real expertise with the short sword, which emphasized her tenacity, but was clumsy with the heavier longsword. And he, with this overwhelming sensual arrogance, kept questioning her motives, pushing her limits.
Asking if she wanted him to find her desirable.
Exactly. And their relationship is complicated even further by his acknowledged status as a bastard born on the wrong side of the blanket, which ironically frees him from the immediate political constraints that Ariel is facing.
So this intense personal atmosphere is the backdrop for the grand reveal. The moment William the Marshal, the Wolf, and their ally Alaric FitzAthelstan meet to discuss the true crisis.
And that crisis is the depth of John's cruelty and paranoia.
And it's William the Marshal, the most trusted and measured man in the realm, who delivers the shocking confirmation that galvanizes their treason. He reveals the true fate of the 24 brave knights captured at Mirabeau.
Nobles and neighbors of Randwulf.
And these knights were taken to Corfe Castle. They weren't ransomed, they weren't quickly executed.
No, they were deliberately left to starve to death in their cells. over a period of up to 16 days, without food or water.
16 days. To watch one another die of deprivation, that's not military, that's psychological warfare designed to terrorize any potential dissenter.
And this detail explains the wolf's immediate consuming rage. The murder of Arthur was one thing, but the systematic, drawn-out starvation of loyal, captured knights. It transforms the mission from just saving Ariel's marriage to an act of necessary vengeance against a murderous king who had abandoned the laws of war and chivalry.
This atrocity gives Eduard FitzRandwulf the moral certainty he needs. He openly declares that Arthur was the rightful heir and calls John a greedy usurper, now a murderer.
His loyalty is pure. It's focused on justice, not political expediency. But the immediate focus has to shift from vengeance to protection.
Because the ultimate target of this entire conspiracy becomes Eleanor of Brittany, Arthur's sister.
Known as the Pearl of Brittany. She is John's ultimate hostage, the key to the final political stability of his realm.
John saw Eleanor as an ongoing threat to the throne. She was the last Plantagenet heir with a stronger hereditary claim than his own children.
And the Marshal is clear. John will never let her go free. He knows that if he were to die, Eleanor would become the immediate rallying point for all those Angevin barons who still longed for a legitimate ruler.
So the complex strategy is devised. William the Marshal has to remain above suspicion.
He has to remain visible, riding openly to Cherbourg to rejoin John, which acts as a perfect high-level alibi for the whole conspiracy.
So the real action falls to the younger generation. The plan hinges on John's own forced marriage plot.
Eduard FitzRandwulf and Henry will take Ariel, who's disguised as a squire, toward Radnor, the supposed location for the wedding. They have the Marshal's official papers of safe conduct, which gives them unimpeded passage south.
But they'll execute a sharp diversion.
And secretly rescue Eleanor from her prison. The sources really emphasize Edward's intense personal devotion to Eleanor. He saw her as his sacred trust, and he was bearing the burden of having failed to protect Arthur.
So for Edward, this mission isn't just political. It's a profound act of personal redemption.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the destination for this rescue is Corfe Castle on the rugged Purbeck Peninsula in Dorset. And we really have to get our heads around Corfe's significance. The sources describe it as a bleak and hellish place where many prisoners disappeared.
Its geography made infiltration nearly impossible. Corfe was John's ideal prison because of its isolation. It sits up on this dramatic hill, a formidable fortress commanding a narrow gap in the surrounding terrain.
And it's on a peninsula, so approaching by land is difficult, and you'd be easily spotted from the sea.
Right. Besieging it was almost impossible. It was here that John housed his most dangerous prisoners, just ensuring they vanish entirely from the world.
And the man John put in charge was Sir Guy of Gisborne, nicknamed Old Swill.
A brutal former champion who, the sources say, rarely carried a blunted sword.
Which means he preferred actual combat and violence.
And Gisborne was placed there specifically to win his way back into John's good graces, meaning he was desperate to prove his ruthlessness and loyalty.
So the infiltration relies entirely on meticulous planning and compromised loyalty inside the castle walls.
Yes. Edward, using a pilgrimage as a ruse, a common and totally credible excuse for travel back then, contacts a man named Captain Brevant. He's a disgruntled guard who William the Marshal's network knew was open to a bribe.
But Brevant was fond of gold and disliked the king. Edward knew he needed more than just money to secure this level of high treason.
So he seals the deal with an emotional anchor. He snaps this small, intricate ring, it was Eleanor's ring, worn around his own neck, and promises Brevant an equal, massive sum of gold upon proof that he delivered it to Eleanor.
That ring transforms the transaction from just a bribe into a sacred trust.
It does. Brevant, realizing the extraordinary risk was matched by an extraordinary reward, disappears with the ring and the initial payment. He promises to make contact once he confirms Eleanor's location and her situation.
And the cover story for getting into the castle area in the first place is detailed and, kind of brilliantly, relies on John's own orders.
They use William the Marshal's genuine letters of safe conduct, which state they are traveling to unite Lady Ariel Henry's sister, still disguised as a squire, with her groom, Reginald de Brose, at Radnor.
To sell the urgency and the need for them to be there for a while, Daffod ap Yorworth feigns a serious waylaying injury, requiring a litter and an escort.
It's a great move. It allows them to just hover around the area without immediately raising alarms about why they aren't riding straight to Radnor.
Once they're inside the complex, Edward, still undercover, manages to track down Eleanor's personal maid, Marianne. She confirms Eleanor is alive. but she reveals a devastating psychological truth.
Eleanor is suffering from deep psychological distress and flat out refuses to leave.
And Marianne reveals the shame that binds her. She says, I cannot go back to Brittany. I cannot let Edward see me like this.
Which suggests a hidden injury far worse than simple captivity. It confirms John inflicted some profound personal humiliation upon her.
And this leads to the shocking truth Edward discovers in the tower. The beauty he knew, the Pearl of Brittany, has been permanently and horrifically marred.
He's horrified to find she has been blinded, her eyes sealed shut by scars. She also suffers from these debilitating fits, described as nightmares or seizures, likely from the physical and psychological trauma.
The blinding was the ultimate act of degradation, John's way of stripping her of her political currency. It wasn't enough to imprison her. She had to be made useless, ugly, incapable of commanding loyalty.
And this reveal just galvanizes Edward. It turns his mission from a political duty into one of pure vengeance and protection.
But it's in this moment of emotional chaos that the plan goes critically sideways. Gisborne, suspicious of the noble party and the lingering presence of Henry and Ariel, captures young Robin.
Edward's squire brother.
Yes, to force the issue. He questions why Ariel's man Edward is missing from the group.
So Edward finds Robin bound, and he knows he has to act decisively. Their cover is completely blown, and Gisborne will report everything back to John.
So to cover their retreat and ensure John's full wrath is focused squarely on him sparing the Marshal, for now Edward confronts Gisborne.
And the act itself is just a shocking display of total commitment. Edward pulls a knife and, in a brutal act of elimination and vengeance, cripples Gisborne with a strike to the groin,
leaving him crippled and castrated.
This eliminates the immediate threat, but most importantly, it ensures King John will be thrown into a frothing fit. The source is clear. Gisborne's description of the scarred knight ensures John knows exactly who the culprit is. Eduard FitzRandwulf d'Amboise.
The stakes have now reached their absolute irreversible height.
So with Gisborne neutralized and their cover irrevocably blown, the group has to execute the final escape immediately.
And Brabant, knowing the castle guard would be doubled and restless by dawn, commits fully. He offers his own sword to join the escape into treason.
The escape plan is refined on the fly. It's all about absolute disguise and speed. Eleanor and Marianne are hidden as common varlets, and the group heads north into Wales, specifically Powys, for temporary sanctuary with Prince Gwynwyn.
Wales gives them the necessary geographic and political distance from John's immediate reach.
But before they get to that sanctuary, there's this crucial emotional beat. They're in the safety of a cavern behind a waterfall, a hideout stalked earlier by their contact, Sparrow.
And Ariel, now officially a fugitive, having witnessed the true depths of John's evil and Edward's honor, confronts him.
Believing her reputation is ruined and her family's standing is forfeit, she offers herself to Edward as his mistress. It's a desperate plea to avoid the politically necessary marriage to the Welsh Lord Rhys ap Iorwerth.
She's looking for the deepest personal security she can find outside the boundaries of this corrupted feudal system.
And Edward's response is the ultimate declaration of honor. It just shows the fundamental difference between him and King John. He refuses to dishonor her or William the Marshal because he understands his actions have to be morally sound to validate the treason they've just committed.
He declares he will take her only as his wife, stating it was to be thus or not at all.
And Ariel, finding this profound honor she never expected from the bastard, accepts the unconventional proposal. It cements a bond forged in defiance.
This marriage requires a significant revision of the plan for Eleanor, though. She can't remain a political hot potato.
No. And Edward reveals his ultimate long-term plan. Eleanor must go to Kirklees Abbey in Nottingham, far from John's strongholds, where she can take permanent vows.
Which is brilliant in its simplicity and effectiveness. Taking vows renders Eleanor politically harmless to King John.
She's legally dead to the world, protected by the church, and her claim is neutralized. It ensures her survival even if John were to remain king for decades. It's the only path that offers her long-term safety and peace.
But this decision requires an immense personal sacrifice from the conspirators. Henry de Clare, Ariel's brother, chooses to stay behind at Kirklees.
He takes up the guise of a tawny-haired monk to protect Eleanor, fulfilling this deep sense of loyalty that transcended his noble birth.
And Henry's evolution is fascinating. The sources say he soon begins gathering outlaws and misfits, becoming a sort of Robin Hood-type figure, or Little John's glaive.
He's building this protective barrier of loyalty and defiance around the isolated princess, making sure that John's assassins will never reach her.
The narrative also gives us some unexpected closure for Dafydd ap Iorwerth. He acts as Henry de Clare's decoy after the escape, drawing attention away from Kirklees.
And fate intervenes. An assassin's arrow intended for Henry strikes him instead, but the injury leads him to his own love match, Gabrielle, the miller's widow who nurses him back to health.
So it seems like everyone who committed this profound act of treason finds some form of personal redemption or fulfillment, even in the midst of extreme danger.
And the reaction from the powerful William the Marshal upon hearing of the entire disaster, the treason, the rescue, Gisborne, and the unexpected marriage of his niece to the wolf's cub, it's incredibly revealing.
He's secretly pleased. The source says he found a wide, not altogether surprised grin warming his heart.
That grin is a massive political statement. The Marshal, the moral center of the realm, is tacitly approving of the defiance. He recognizes that John's actions have become intolerable and that the conspirators chose personal honor over the stability of a corrupt throne.
And John's reaction, predictably, is just pure, unbridled fury.
He is thrown into a month-long frothing fit upon learning that Edward and Ariel married and that Eleanor, the lost princess of Brittany, had vanished right under his nose.
His failure to contain the last legitimate claimant and secure the Marshal's niece just highlights his profound loss of control and his ultimate insecurity.
And the sources confirm Eleanor's long-term safety. She became a ghostly specter to the realm, safe in her cloister, and Henry de Clare visited her faithfully every single week for the next 17 years.
Wow. It's a powerful final detail. It confirms their immense sacrifice achieved its ultimate personal goal.
So if we connect this whole narrative to the broader historical context, this deep dive really demonstrates the truly corrosive nature of King John's power. His personal insecurity dictated the slow, agonizing starvation of 24 brave knights.
And culminated in the calculated blinding of his own niece.
Exactly. This cycle of political desperation and tyrannical cruelty was ultimately broken not by a mass uprising, but by extraordinary personal acts of defiance, driven by deep emotional and moral bonds.
It's an analysis of what honor even means in a collapsing system. The detail of John relying on holy relics to project piety is in such stark contrast to Edward's decision to risk everything to ensure Ariel's dignity as his wife.
This narrative gives us a clear delineation between power based on coercion and nobility based on moral choice.
I think the aha moment for the learner here is recognizing that the forced marriage plot wasn't a distraction, it was the essential high-stakes cover story.
It's what provided the conspirators with the genuine paperwork and geographical alibi they needed to penetrate the most secure prison in the kingdom. They used John's own tyrannical policies against him to save a blinded, forgotten princess.
And despite facing the immediate, terrifying wrath of King John and sacrificing their reputations, the conspirators ultimately achieved a profound personal victory. Eleanor was safe, cloistered, and Ariel and Edward found their own deeply unconventional and deeply honorable path together.
Which raises an important question that just echoes through history. When a regime becomes this cruel and corrupt, is personal honor and moral duty ever worth risking the stability of a kingdom?
And in this detailed narrative, the answer is a resounding yes.
The stability Joan offered was already rotten. It was built on murder and fear. The loyalty shown by the Wolf's Cub and William the Marshal's niece redefined what honor meant in an age of conscienceless kings.
And think about this. While the immediate political threat of Eleanor was neutralized by placing her in the Abbey, Henry de Clare's decision to remain there, gathering misfits and outlaws as Little John's glaive, ultimately created a different kind of long-term stability.
One based not on royal decree, but on the principles of justice and an unwavering loyalty to the wronged.
It suggests that true authority sometimes needs to be rebuilt entirely from the margins. Something for you to mull over until our next deep dive.